Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's beat these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Here we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's Rant of the Week, and we're talking through a hard-fought loss as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 279. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with Greg Cosell about the Eagles and their Week 6 loss to the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, there's a lot of good and plenty of bad to talk through on both sides of the ball, as there often is on any game, much less a loss. So Greg and I will do all of that in Chalk Talk. Before we get to that discussion, though, just a quick reminder, if you have not lately, please jump onto Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. And if you've got a question, I promise that we will answer it here on the show. If not here on this episode, the early in the week with Greg, then for sure later each week on our episodes with Ben Fennell, where we always dive in deeper into the Eagles' upcoming matchup. By the way, if you are a fan of the NFL draft, or if you're starting to kind of get that inkling that you want to start looking ahead, see who the top players are in next spring's draft, you can always catch Ben and I every single week, twice a week, over on the Journey to the Draft podcast, where, again, we're twice a week, just like we are right here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. All right, enough of that. Let's dive into our chat now with Greg Cosell in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
All right, well, joining me once again here on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, my friend Greg Cosell. Greg, welcome back to the show, sir.
Fran, good to be with you.
Obviously, another tough loss here for the Eagles, and it's been a couple in a row now against two tough teams where we've seen some good, saw some bad. I said it earlier at the top of the show, and I thought we saw offensively it was kind of a tale of two halves, because that first half was about as ugly as it can get offensively up until the latter stages of the second quarter, when they were able to generate a couple first downs and kind of get things going. Before we get into the game and some takeaways, we'll start the way we always start, and that's talking about the quarterback. Interested to kind of get your thoughts on Carson Wentz and his performance in this game.
I thought it was a really gutsy performance. I mean, if you're just being realistic, you have to say that, right now, due to injury, the Eagles do not have a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball. He was clearly under duress all game. The offensive line against a really, really good defense clearly struggled. And Wentz just had to hang in there and just keep playing. So I wouldn't say it was pretty, but I thought it was really gutsy and competitive. And when you do put up 28 points against the Ravens defense, you'd have to say, when all's said and done, that that's a pretty good performance, because that Raven defense is a really tough assignment.
I mean, like we talk about, I think it was the most he's ever been hit in a game. I'm pretty sure it was like 16 hits, if I remember right, and that's the most he's ever been hit. He was sacked, I believe, 6 times. Those weren't it was the two-hand touch. He kind of got hit on the shoulder pads. He took some violent shots in this game. And with what he was able to do throughout, with some of the throws he delivered, and not only that, but like overcoming the adversity of just brutal drops, the one to Hightower, the one to Sanders in the end zone, like some really tough drops as well. But for him to overcome that, fight through it, and then you see like the 40-yard run in the fourth quarter. You see him hanging in the pocket and making plays. You see him, the second reaction play on the touchdown to Jason Kroom. Like, just one of the best individual performances from Wentz, from that toughness and that competitiveness standpoint, really in his career. When you consider all the context involved, in my opinion.
And I think you can say that, Fran, in all honesty, about the last 2 weeks, because they played arguably the two best defenses in the league. Maybe statistically they are. I don't know. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. You might know.
I think on a points per game basis, I'm pretty sure Baltimore and Pittsburgh are 1 and 2 right now.
So, I mean, they scored 57 points, and they were all offensive points, and there were no really short drives, as I recall, in either one of those games.
Oh.
So when you think of it that way, again, and we're not looking to place blame on anybody, but when you score 29 and 28 points against those two defenses, you feel you're in a pretty good position to win those two games. So and again, it has to be said, and the Eagles know this, the entire league knows this. The offensive line is clearly a weakness right now, and against two defenses that really can exploit that weakness. They do it in different ways, but they can exploit that weakness. And it was a really gutsy, competitive performance by Wentz. I mean, the fourth down touchdown to Fulgham. People can say what they want. Oh, he just threw it up, but I believe that was cover zero.
It was, yep.
And cover zero, you often throw it up as a quarterback to give your receiver a chance.
Yeah, and you put it in play in the back of the end zone to let his guy go and get it. I 100% agree with you on that. And you talk about the offensive line. I mean, they come into this game, obviously no Lane Johnson. So Jack Driscoll, the rookie, starts at right tackle. He leaves in the fourth quarter. Brett Toth comes in, who they just signed off waivers last week. At right guard, you've got, I believe, the fourth right guard of the season, Jamon Brown, who, I mean,
and obviously
not a good performance, right?
No, yeah, we're not saying anything bad by saying that he had a really difficult time.
A very, very difficult day. Obviously, and then you've got a first-year starter in Nate Herbig at left guard, Milada making his third start ever playing the sport at left tackle, and then you've got Jason Kelce at center, who's he's the other anchor there with Carson Wentz. You finished the game with no Miles Sanders. He left midway through the game. You finished the game no Zach Ertz, obviously no Dallas Goedert, no Jalen Reagor, no Deshaun Jackson, no Alshon Jeffrey. The list goes on and on and on with what Carson was able to do. Truly just a courageous effort. And
you didn't even mention the fact that Driscoll got hurt and Toth, who I also don't believe has ever played a regular season snap. Is that correct?
I believe that to be correct, yes.
I know he played in a preseason, but I do not believe he's ever taken a regular season snap. So, of course, what does a good defense do? On the second snap, they challenge him with a slot corner blitz. He sees it late. Humphrey sacks Wentz.
Yep.
Later in the fourth quarter, they challenge both Toth and Brown with a TE stunt. That was the interception that was overturned. But Bowser, the looper, got in clean, and he laid into Wentz on that throw. So, I mean, like you said, it was just one of many clean shots he took that were not just little love taps, that were real shots.
No, I felt like every single one of those hits. I mean, even early, just every single one was just a brutal, violent hit, on Carson. And he kept getting right back up and fighting through it. When you talk about the issues along the offensive line, that impacts not just pass protection, obviously, but also the run game. And just another week where they're really struggling to get things going consistently. They had the one long run, but after that, it's just tough sledding for that group up front. They have not been able to generate consistent movement to be able to give those running backs any room to work.
No, because essentially, Sanders, his numbers are great because of some long runs. But just like a week ago, he had the long touchdown run, and this week the long run that ended up being a touchdown on the fumble. But besides those two runs, they've generated nothing in the run game against either Pittsburgh or Baltimore.
Yeah, and those runs obviously count, but when you're talking about overall the run game being effective, it just has not been the case over the course of the last couple of weeks. And I don't think that helps Sanders either, just because, again, we've said this throughout his career, is that there are times approaching line of scrimmage, he'll kind of chatter his feet. He's not always as decisive, kind of making his way through. So when there is those issues and the inconsistencies in the offensive line in the run game, that kind of feeds into that, and that gives him more problems. So they're going to have to continue to try and fix that. Hopefully, with reinforcements coming back, with Lane Johnson potentially being on the way back, Isaac Seumalo being on the way back soon, that can kind of help things. But look, that they're going to have to still get a couple of those positions figured out to get things going there in the run game. Let's real quickly talk about the pass catchers. We obviously saw a lot of Travis Fulgham again in the second half in particular. Was not as huge a factor in the first half. But John Hightower, I thought it was good to see him kind of bounce back after that early drop, which was a beautiful throw from Carson Wentz, right in the breadbasket. It goes right through his hands. Good to see Hightower bounce back and make that play down the field late in the third quarter as well.
Yeah, I don't know how you felt, but I saw that live, and when I saw it live, it was one of those plays that happened in slow motion. You see the ball up there, and you see him open, and it took about 20 seconds for the ball to come down. And you're thinking, oh man, this might even be a touchdown, and then he drops it. But no, that was the first series, and that was third and long, if I'm not mistaken.
It was third and long. Yep.
Yeah. So that was a killer because this was the kind of game where you knew that any chance you had to take advantage of. You couldn't leave any plays on the field.
So let me ask you this, Greg, because they go into this game on Thursday night with, as reports are, and obviously nothing official yet, but reports are no Miles Sanders, reports are no Zach Ertz. status up in the air with the receivers we talked about. Obviously, no return of Dallas Goedert in sight. We'll have to wait and see. We're recording this Monday, 6:45, so we don't know Jalen Reagor's status either. So going into knowing this, I mean, I want to bring this conversation to Jalen Hurts. Like, do you think that we'll see more Jalen Hurts on Thursday night just because they need to find way? Well, we said this weeks ago when a couple of the receivers got hurt and Goddard got hurt. But now, playmakers just keep dropping. I feel like we might have to start seeing more Jalen Hurts with him on the field alongside Carson Wentz, just because they have to find ways to manufacture offense. The run game really was only very effective when Hurts was on the field, and you had that element added into the offense.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I think you're going to see that. But I think you have to be a little careful about that. We'll see, but I think it will happen. I really believe it will, just because they basically do not have playmakers. I mean, I guess if you're a fantasy guy, Jason Crew might be your guy on Thursday night.
But that's the thing. It's like, if you're talking about trying to get your best guys on the field, what are the things that work for you? The offense, I think, was it the first 5 drives or the first 6 drives? It was all 3 and outs with negative negative yardage and the fumble on the first play of a drive. They could not get anything going. And I feel like the spark was, all right, we'll get Jalen Hurts in there and you run a couple option plays, and that kind of got the offense moving, and things started working from there.
No, we had the 20-yard run, and then they had a couple of other plays which really didn't gain any yards, but they looked exciting. So, but you're right. I think I would not be surprised if Jalen Hurts plays 15 to 20 snaps Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming into this game, it was 12 snaps, and 6 of them went for first downs. I think coming out of it, it's 18 snaps, and half of them went for first downs and touchdowns. For all the things involved, it's tough to argue with that level of efficiency. And obviously, it is a small sample size, but with a team that's personnel wise, with all the injuries, they're almost grasping at straws. They're going to have to find ways to be able to move
No, I mean, again, I believe it will happen. And you can make the argument that it smacks of desperation, but they're probably in desperation mode because they don't have players. But I was not joking about Jason Crew. He played in Buffalo, and I watched him there, and He's actually a very athletic tight end. He went to college as a wide receiver. I imagine he's going to get snaps on Thursday night. Certainly if Zach Ertz is not playing, Jason Crew is going to get snaps. And he's actually got athleticism and speed. So I'm not sitting here telling you he's going to go 8 for 130, but he's an intriguing player. And again, I don't know how much of the offense he knows at this point. It's a different offense than where he's been. So, but he does have athleticism and speed.
And Hakeem Butler, the Eagles have as their third tight end right now as well.
He's been here for 2-3 weeks now.
A couple weeks now. So what were your thoughts on Hakeem Butler? Obviously, he was a receiver at Iowa State, but a big kid.
And I liked him a lot, as you know, Fran. I thought he was a wide receiver. And again, I don't know what happened in Arizona. I certainly don't know the kid, but I thought that he was a legitimate wideout coming to the NFL. So I can't tell you what happened. I know he's being talked about and was signed theoretically as a tight end, but I think he certainly can be a flexed player.
Real quick, we talked about the offensive line. I didn't ask you about Jordan Milada before we moved to the defense. What were your thoughts on Jordan Milada in his third start?
I think he's doing okay. I mean, I don't think he's the problem. I didn't think he was the problem in this game. So I think he's doing okay. I don't study him on every play. You probably do. What are your thoughts?
I'll tell you what, Greg, just real quick before, because this obviously isn't impactful in terms of his overall performance in the game. I don't know if you noticed this, but on the fumble in the first half by Carson Wentz in the zone read, Jordan Milada. Oh my goodness! Yeah. We watched that on repeat a number just to be impressed with the physical marvel that he is.
Yeah, I will say this: I think that he's still working through the fact that the kinds of movements that you need to pass protect are not natural athletic movements.
Right.
He's a great athlete, but the movements you need to pass protect are not natural athletic movements. But I don't think he's been a problem.
Yeah, we've said numerous times that he's never looked out of place. I will say here are my 2 big takeaways from this game. Any questions that anybody had about his toughness and is he a glass eater up front? I think you throw that out in this game because I think there were numerous times, even though the offensive line has struggled to move the ball in the run game, I thought that he showed some not only power because he's got that, but also the ability to finish. He put like 3 or 4 guys on the ground in this game, and I thought that was a really good sign for him and his future moving forward. And then the other thing is just what I've just mentioned, that raw power. I mean, there were a number of snaps where you look at that final 2-point play, which I guess I'll ask you that too before we go to the defensive side. The final 2-point play, the movement he gets at the point of attack, you just see like on double teams and just, I mean, he's a big, strong, powerful guy. Just in the trenches, what he does is really impressive.
I would say it this way. I would like to see him play out the rest of the season on left tackle.
Yeah.
I know Jason Peters is going to be healthy and come back at some point. I would like to see Jordan Milada play left tackle for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think the other big thing, too, that we should talk about offensively before we move over to the defense was the final play, the 2-point play. There's been a lot of discussion in the city and, with the fans and stuff, about the play. Look, it was very clear, and Doug Peterson talked about this today, that, they need to get the play in faster. They're clearly it was an ugly look of the play on the field. And, there's – obviously, it looked like it was going to be a zone read. There were 2 defenders there in the backfield. You had L.J. Fort and you had Matt Judon there in the backfield. Typically, if it's a zone read, you're not going to have 2 defenders free. So whether there was a miscommunication on who was going to block who, or if it was a miscommunication on someone's got to run this route, or this is going to be a pass play, or going to check out of it. Clearly, just not everybody firing on all cylinders mentally on that play.
Yeah, I guess what struck me as interesting was we knew that Rodgers went across the formation in motion. And, you and I actually discussed this earlier. I'm not sure exactly at that point what was supposed to happen. So I can't speak to whether there was a mistake or not a mistake. The result of the play makes it easy to say that it was not a great call. I'm not going to go there because I don't know exactly what happened there. And then, the coaches do, and they're not going to state it publicly because they're just not. So, like I said, I'm sure on Sports Talk Radio, which, I'm obviously working in my office, so I'm not listening to Sports Talk Radio, but I'm sure there's been a lot of talk about it, but I just don't know.
Yeah, it's tough for us on the outside to be able to say with certainty exactly who was responsible for what on that play. I would just say, you mentioned like we saw Rodgers come in motion from right to left. My guess is if he understands that it's a zone read, he's not in motion there to release out into a route unless it's some kind of an RPO, which that's what I mean. Like there's so many things in play here that we don't know. And with that kind of play, it can go ugly fast. So clearly there's just a lot of miscommunication there on that play. But the decision to go for, I think there's also been a lot of conversation about going for 2. The Eagles went 2 for 4 on 2-point conversion plays in the game. And they were in position to tie it at the end if they had hit on that third one, which shows why you go for 2, like why they went for 2.
Really? There's been a lot of talk about going for 2 there?
Not going for 2 there, but going for 2 like, if they wouldn't have had to do it if they didn't go for 2 on the first one. To me, that was the whole point was you're not in the position to tie that game if you hadn't made the 2 on the first 2. To me, the whole 2-point conversion play, obviously the numbers show that was they're making those smart decisions when they're playing from behind in those kind of scenarios. Let's go over to the defensive side, Greg. And obviously, look, Lamar Jackson, we talked about the creativity of that run game and how tall of a task it was. And he got his in the run game. He ran for over 100 yards. He had the long one, where he just looked so explosive on that play. And everything that goes into that, the Eagles had some issues there from that side of it. To me, one of the things I took away, I was actually pretty impressed with. I thought they did a good job of kind of bottling him up as a scrambler when he dropped back to throw. We continued to see some of the issues that he's had throwing the football. I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts overall on what the major takeaway was for you on the defensive side of the ball in this game.
Well, a couple of takeaways, and we can work through them, relatively quickly. But all the different personnel packages, I actually, watching the tape, I said, I kind of like what Jim Schwartz is doing here. A lot of different personnel packages. So I thought that was really good because you're trying to find a way to match up to an offense that is a different offense than any that you will see in the league. Much like what the Bengals did a week earlier, and I know you watched that tape, the Bengals basically said to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense, we're going to dare you to throw the ball they played a 4-3 stack with their safeties really low in what looked like a cover 4 look, but the safeties were really low. They were daring Lamar Jackson to throw the ball, and they didn't throw it well. The Eagles did that a little differently. They had McLeod play pretty low in their cover 3, almost like that 3 robber that we've seen from the Eagles, and they were daring Jackson and the Ravens to go over the top, and they didn't. From the Ravens' perspective, this is something that they're going to need to address going forward. But overall, I thought that the Eagles did a pretty good job. They did an excellent job in the run game overall, I thought, because the 3 Ravens backs had 28 for 74. That's pretty good work. The Jackson, touchdown run was, that's what Jackson.
That's what happens. Exactly right. Yep.
And actually, the center Skura missed his block on Graham, but the play still worked because of the impact of the backfield action on Singleton and Nate Gary. But so hey, that's Lamar Jackson. He's the most explosive athlete at quarterback in the game. But I actually thought that the defense, I know the points were there, but I thought the defense overall was not bad.
The thing really, honestly, early on was that, they get by allowing 3 third and long conversions in the first half. That they couldn't get off the field those 3 times. Yeah. That gives them 2 touchdowns right there. And if you get off the field in those scenarios, now you're talking those are field goals instead of touchdowns. It's a different game. You say that we can say that every week, but it's a whole different outcome. It changes the way that the entire scope of that game.
No, and we saw, a lot of guys get snaps. Singleton played almost every snap. Bradley was in, because of one of the packages. We saw what they did there. He played in the base defense because of how much the fullback plays. So Sean Bradley was the Mike linebacker with Gary and Singleton, the outside backers.
What'd you think of Bradley?
I thought he played pretty well. It's funny. I really liked his college tape, but I thought he was just not quite athletic enough to be, the kind of guy you say, hey, he's definitely a starting Mike linebacker. But I thought that he had really good play recognition, a good feel for working through traffic. I just didn't think that he was quite athletic enough, and I guess time will tell.
Right.
What did you think of his college tape?
I liked his college tape. I think when you looked at his aggressiveness and he made, especially what stood out to me too about him was that in their games against Power 5 schools, you look at Maryland, Georgia Tech, you look at them just over the course of the last couple of years, their biggest games, I thought he always kind of rose to the occasion and had some of his best games. So that was one thing that always stood out to me about him.
Then 2 more points. I thought Singleton played well. I like what I've seen from Singleton. You could make the argument he's their best linebacker right now.
I thought this was his best game, too. I thought when you saw him he's always been really decisive getting downhill in the run game.
But for sure.
Yeah, that's one of his best traits. And then he defeated some blocks with quickness as well in this game, too.
He played 90% of the snaps, Fran.
Yeah. I thought he did it.
And then we saw Davion Taylor get in, versus 22 personnel. I didn't get a great feel for him in the 10 or 11 snaps he played, but he obviously was his first game active, I believe. And, he played, 10, 11 snaps.
Yeah, I don't remember it being. I was actually planning on, after we're done here, I'm actually going to go back and watch just those plays because I'm going to post a couple of them on Twitter. There are a couple of them that just from memory. You kind of saw the speed in the open field. It was actually on the.
There was one where you saw him run down. It was Lamar.
It was the game-sealing play.
The 21-yarder that ended the game.
Yes, exactly. You saw and that was. That's a play that's in their playbook. It's there's just the naked keeper, and he just goes out the back door. But you just kind of saw the speed there from Taylor in the open field for sure.
So I thought they did some really good things. I thought McLeod again stood out in this game, especially playing downhill in the run game.
He's had a good year. He's had a good year so far.
I would agree with you. He stands out on tape. Were you surprised they did not match Slay up to Brown?
A little bit. And I think
Roby, we didn't mention the fact that Roby was the outside corner in this game and Mills was back playing safety.
Yeah, so to me, though, here's the way I look at that. Knowing that they were going into a short week this week, Avonte Maddox did practice on a limited basis last week. I wonder if they kind of thought, look, we're getting Will Parks back. Let's get into our safety rotation the way that we plan to moving forward with both Mills and Parks working together, more big nickel, more dime, with both Parks and Mills on the field as safeties. And then, that now next week on the short week of prep, Avonte just plugs in at right corner, and we're not trying to make these kind of adjustments and get everybody used to doing it
short week.
on the short week.
that could be it. That's a great point. But I think Parks will end up being really important to this defense.
Yeah, and I thought, in this game, we saw him play, but obviously plenty because of the way that Baltimore lines up from a personnel standpoint with their heavy personnel, their base personnel. But he's going to be a big factor in terms of, how often they're playing in base defense with 3 linebackers on the field. I think you'll see more of the big nickel with him, and you'll see more certainly of heavy dime with him on the field. And I think that's certainly an upgrade for the Eagles.
I agree.
So it's good to be able to get him back. It was good to see him back on the field. I don't think there was anything else. I guess defensive line-wise, I thought Josh Sweat had a good game. Honestly, a lot of the linemen really I thought Fletcher Cox was really good in this game. Brandon Graham, Malik Jackson was really active. Josh Sweat had a couple of really nice flash plays. Derek Barnett was really physical and violent. I thought the defensive line overall, I thought looked pretty good in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that it was a weird game in the sense that the Ravens obviously put up points, but I don't feel like the Ravens did a lot consistently. They obviously, that first drive did set a bit of a tone because they did convert those third downs.
That was the tough part. Yep.
Those ended up being obviously critical. But I thought the Eagles did a nice job in the second half. They played a lot of one robber on 3rd and long, which is a good coverage against Lamar because McLeod is basically sitting there as kind of a robber spy. So I thought that's a good coverage against Lamar Jackson. And I think they did that 3 times on 3rd and long in the second half.
Yep. Yeah, I think to me that this was and honestly, this is what we've seen from Baltimore this year, right? Where the offense, you just don't get the feel like they're operating on all cylinders yet. And, the defense, the defense didn't really get crushed. But at the end of the day, they put up 25 points, 28 points, 30 points, and they win the game. Like that's kind of been Baltimore this year. Unfortunately, the Eagles on the opposite end of that in this matchup. So, Greg, with that being said, let's close the book on week 6. Let's move over to week 7 and look at this Eagles-Giants game on Thursday night. Obviously, a short turnaround here. Give us an elevator speech. Look, they're missing Saquon Barkley offensively, right? And obviously, he's their blue-chip player. They haven't had a ton of other injuries, I don't think, on the offensive side of the football. As I kind of open up my notes on those guys. No, I mean, they're Sterling Shepard's on injury reserve as well, and that's certainly a loss. They lost Nate Solder to an opt-out in the summer. But outside of that, this is an offense that they've struggled. Throwing the ball, running the football. I think that Daniel Jones has shown some flashes. He's just, he's under constant duress from this offensive line. The pass catchers just aren't quite up to snuff yet. The run game has not been able to get going without Saquon. So it's been tough for them offensively.
It's been difficult. Look, Jones is an easy guy to blame because they're the O-line. See, I think they thought their O-line would be better. And again, not that it would be a top 5 O-line in the league, but I think they thought they'd plug Andrew Thomas right in a left tackle. He's been up and down. I think given who they have across the O-line, they did think it would be a better group, but they've not been able to generate any consistency running the ball. Obviously, Barkley's not there. And in pass protection's been tough. And Daniel Jones he's a guy that I think it's in his DNA to stand and deliver the football even under duress. But at some point, that's hard to do. And no matter what a quarterback, what his DNA is, I think you start to just anticipate and perceive pressure. I mean, look at the interception he threw this week against the Washington football team in the end zone to Fuller, where, he's trying to make a throw and there's pressure and, you just make a throw and he'll advise throw. But if he has time, he can look good throwing the football without question.
To me, talking about their run game, their best version of their run game is with Daniel Jones on zone reads, man. I mean, that's where they've had, honestly, the most success. Devonte Freeman, they brought in a couple weeks ago. He has struggled to really kind of get going. He's never been like a blue chip physical talent. Obviously, a lot of what we've always liked about Devonte Freeman was, his decisiveness, his instincts, his ability to kind of make that first man miss. He's not an explosive athlete. He's not a powerful guy, but just his ability to make that first man miss and be decisive. That's just been tough with the play of this offensive line so far. So he has kind of struggled. But Jones, a very athletic player. I mean, this is a guy, when he does take off, he's got the ability to hurt you on the ground. I know I'm pretty sure he had a long one this week. He's had a couple long ones over the course of the season.
And in some ways, just like you talked about Jalen Hurts with the Eagles, I think they might have to try to rely on that a little more just to try to create some opportunities for their offense.
Yeah. And then looking at their offensive line, the rookie top 5 pick, Andrew Thomas, has been at left tackle every week except for this week. He did get benched this week due to, and I think it was a broken rule off the field.
That's what they said, yes.
Yeah, they said it was not performance-based. He has not played particularly well.
No, he's not.
Yeah, it seemed like early on that he was getting beat a lot high side, with speed rushes. And I feel like he started then to counter that with oversetting, and then he was getting beat on inside moves. So it's just been kind of a welcome to the NFL start of the season here for Andrew Thomas, which has been tough for the Giants because you look around the league and you see the way Becton has played when healthy. You look at Jedrick Wills, you look at Tristan Wirfs, all those other tackles have all found success early on. He has been the lone guy who has struggled for that position.
And as we talked about leading up to the draft, there are a lot of people who felt that he was just sort of a model of consistency and would step right in and maybe not be an all-pro Hall of Famer, but be able to play right from day one and be really solid.
Yep.
And he's very, very inconsistent. And you hit on a really good point. I think he struggled with the edge, and then the last thing you want is to get beat off the edge. So what do? You just open the gate. You don't open the gate. You try to close the gate way too fast.
Right.
And that causes other problems.
Yeah, he's opening the other gate. That's the problem. He's
the other gate,
inside.
exactly.
He's over the inside gate. And then Will Hernandez. I think we kind of know what Will Hernandez is at this point. He's a big, powerful kid, but he's a little bit limited physically. And then you have Nick Gates, who I think is a first or second year starter out of Nebraska. He was an athletic kid, a little bit undersized.
I believe he was a tackle in Nebraska because I remember doing it.
Yes, I believe so. And then Kevin Zeitler is a solid player at right guard. He's fine. And then Cameron Fleming has kind of been a journeyman. He's kind of bounced around a couple different teams. He played for both Jason Garrett in Dallas as well as Joe Judge in New England. So he had connections there, came in and became the starter at right tackle. It's just a line that has not played particularly well. Interesting to get your thoughts just in case that suspension holds up for another week. I'm not sure if it's not or it is or not.
I don't think it will.
I was going to say, did you get any kind of feel from Matt Pert, who was the 3rd round pick out of UConn? He started in place of Andrew Thomas at left tackle.
Yeah. You know what? I kind of like Matt. I think it's Pert, isn't it?
Is it? Okay.
I think so, but I could be wrong. But he was an intriguing guy to watch coming out of Connecticut. Did you look at him?
I did. Oh, yeah. He's an athletic kid.
Really athletic, really big kid, long arms. I thought he had, in some ways, obviously he's played a lot more football than Jordan Mailata. He was a 4-year starter.
No question. Yeah.
But but I think that he's a guy that he's going to have some good snaps and some not so good snaps. But I think he has a chance to be a good player. Again, people get caught up in, is he a right tackle or a left tackle? I am so far beyond that conversation in today's NFL.
Yep.
I don't even think that's a conversation anymore. Personally, I know people will probably disagree with me. That's fine. I don't go there anymore just because the nature of defenses now. But I think he has a chance to be a good player. I think they envision Thomas and Pert being their tackles going forward. It's just a matter of who plays left and who plays right in their mind.
Yep.
And not because of one guy has left tackle traits or right tackle traits, just where are they more comfortable?
Yeah, and Thomas had played both, at Georgia. He was a left tackle last year, but he played right tackle the year before. Let's quickly go to the pass catchers. The guy is Darius Slayton, right? I mean, in terms of he's got all 3 of their touchdowns through the air. I will say, he's got 41 targets through the first 6 games. Evan Ingram only has 38. Only 3 less. So he is a highly targeted player, but in terms of usage, Slayton is obviously the big play threat. They haven't really leveraged Ingram vertically. A lot of his routes, slants, sticks, shallows. It's all kind of short stuff, quick game, Jason Witten style stuff with Evan Ingram. But certainly Darius Slayton is the big play threat.
And that surprises me about Ingram because I think one of the reasons you draft him, and given what his traits are, I remember
he ran 4.4. Yeah, he's a receiver.
He ran a 4.4 at the combine. You were there. I was there. That's what was so impressive about him. So maybe they feel that it's a pass protection issue, but there's no question that Slayton is the guy that you have to be most concerned about vertically, because the last thing you want to do, you want to have to make this giant offense have to go 12, 13 plays to score, and the Eagles obviously, look, this week they played a ton more zone than they have for obvious reasons, Lamar Jackson. They've been playing a lot of man. I wonder if they'll stay with more zone, because you want to make the Giants have to execute snap after snap after snap. And also, you're going to feel as if your D-line is clearly the dominant unit versus the Giants' O-line. So why give Slayton an opportunity to run by your corners? Now, Slay did not match up to Hollywood Brown last week. Does Slay match up to Darius Slayton? You would think so, but, I was surprised he didn't match up to Hollywood Brown. But the last thing you want, and I like Slay a lot, but even Slay can be burned over the top. That's the last thing you want to have happen in this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they've been getting their points. This is a team that's averaging less than 17 a game. And as I said, he has got their 3 pass catching, their 3 receiving touchdowns. So, keep him on lockdown, and you should have success in this game. And that's seems to be a recipe for success against this outfit. The only other real pass catcher I would say you put on in terms of proven NFL success right now, because they brought in Austin Mack. They promoted him from the practice squad last week. I know he had a solid camp out of Ohio State, undrafted free agent. But after that, it's C.J. Board at the receiver position. Yep. The other guy is Golden Tate. Now,
Board got hurt, I think, this week.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think it was a shoulder
off.
That's right. Yes, exactly. So,
yeah.
I think you're looking at obviously Slayton. You look at Golden Tate, and mostly from the slot as well as at Z, but shallows, slant routes, option routes, some double moves on the inside, but he's working in the slot in the intermediate area.
Yeah, so it's just not a very good offense. I mean, again, an NFL game, you never know what's going to happen, and you certainly don't want to go in here saying, "Oh, the Eagles are just going to dominate." But this is an offense right now. When you look at it on tape, there's not a lot to hang your hat on, which is why you cannot get beat by the big play. It's an NFL offense. They'll make a few plays, but you cannot give up long touchdowns. You just cannot. They've shown look, they had not scored a touchdown, in 4 weeks, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make them go 12, 13 plays to score a touchdown. You have to make them do that.
So let's get over to the defensive side. And this is a defense that's coached by Patrick Graham, who was a Bill Belichick disciple, worked with Joe Judge in New England. He was the defensive coordinator for Brian Flores last year in Miami. So the Eagles have faced Graham defense in the most recent past. The basic outline, ton of man coverage. They will disguise some things, but a ton of man coverage, and you're going to get some diversity in terms of their fronts and their looks and things of that nature. But on the back end, going to be a ton of man. Is there any other big takeaways there?
Because they've not played as much man as I think they play man. And 2-man is something they play a lot of, but they've actually played a lot more zone in recent weeks. So I'm going to be curious, what their plan is here. They play a ton of sub.
It's a ton of sub package. Yep.
A ton of sub packages. And, they've got some players on the back end. Bradberry's a good pro. Logan Ryan can line up and do a lot of different things for you, as can Jabril Peppers. So Love, who was a college corner, is basically their post safety.
Right. Yep.
So, I think they're, in some ways, both Joe Judge and Patrick Graham, the DC, do come from the Bill Belichick school. So what you're going to see a lot of, Fran, I think, is multiple front looks with some coverage consistency. You're not going to get, a ton of crazy coverage looks, although they had a real interesting deal last week on a Bradberry interception where they clearly showed man by how they lined up with corners over, and then they played zone, and Bradberry got an interception. So, they will do that on occasion, but mostly you're going to get more of the multiplicity comes from what they do with their fronts.
Right, exactly. I mean, and when you look at it, that's if you're talking about who are the best players on this defense. To me, I'd go number 97. I'm going to go Dexter Lawrence. I mean, that guy has the ability to be a real disruptor on the inside. Yes. He's not a quick. This isn't Aaron Donald in terms of play style. This is big, physical, hulking nose tackle that can really wreck things inside. And that has been the kind of player that has given Jason Kelce trouble over the course of his career.
That's a great point. And I remember they played the Niners a few weeks ago, and even though the Niners won that game, Dexter Lawrence was dominant against that 49er O-line, just absolutely dominant. Yeah. And he's a concern in this game. And Leonard Williams has sort of had some flashes this year.
He had a sack last week.
Yeah. I think he's got 3. He's kind of been forgotten because he was a high pick, I think the 5th pick in a draft, and people expected him to be a big sack guy, and it certainly didn't work out with the Jets. But I think he's had some positive snaps this year.
Yeah, to me, that is the strength. When you look at what's the group that is the most well put together, you look at that three-man front. You have Dalvin Tomlinson at nose tackle, Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams on either side of them. They bring in B.J. Hill and R.J. McIntosh off the bench. Austin Johnson is there, the former Penn State star, former first-round pick for Tennessee.
They got some depth there.
Yeah, they do. And that's that group. And then you look off the edge. Lorenzo Carter is he didn't play this week, but this is an athletic kid who's he can get after it a little bit because of his explosiveness. Marcus Golden, they brought back late in the preseason to get him back. He was their leading sack guy a year ago. They brought in Kyler Fackrell in free agency, who's kind of been a do-everything guy, kind of a utility player throughout the course of his career. But with how they're playing, he's used often on different stunts, and he can on a defense like this, he can be he's not this guy, but he can be like a Kyle Van Noy type of player, right?
Yeah, and I think they probably see him that way.
Yeah.
And he played every snap this past week. I mean, he's clearly one of their most important players.
Yeah, and Blake Martinez is their 3-down linebacker. Another signing from Green Bay. You mentioned James Bradberry. He's their top corner. How have they been using him in your mind in terms of matching people? Not that I don't know if they're going to match him up to anybody, but how have they been using him over the course of the season?
Almost hard to figure because I'm looking at the Giants' schedule because a couple of weeks ago, he matched up to Allen Robinson, traveled with him, did not match up to McLaurin. So, I mean, I don't know what their thought process is. My guess is he won't match up to anybody on the Eagles, but who knows? I mean, I don't think Fulgham is a guy you're going to say, even though he's almost turned into the Eagles' number one receiver in 2 weeks.
I was going to say, speak for yourself, Greg. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. But, I mean, sometimes they've matched him up and other times they haven't. So I don't know what their thought process is. When all the coaches at 11 o'clock at night are drinking their scotch and putting their game plans together, I don't know how they see that on a week-to-week basis.
Are you like up at night, like drinking scotch, like as you're watching film?
No.
That's not the go-to.
And by the way, when it gets to be 11 o'clock, I'm asleep.
I mean, when you get to some teams, I got to think the scotch is going to be that's like a necessity, right?
Maybe the Giants.
Right, exactly right. Well, Greg, look, it's an NFC East matchup. This is going to be pivotal. This is huge for the Eagles because while this stretch of this past 3 games, was tough, and we knew that going in, this next 3 with the Giants twice and the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, this is season defining right now, right?
I think this game is really important, not just because they have to win. That's not my point. But given that the points they put up against the 2 best defenses in the NFL, I'm not saying they should put up 45 against the Giants. That's not my point. But there has to be – the offense, to me, has to look good this week. There has to be some – and I know they're missing players. Like you said,
a lot of players
is out. I don't know. Is Corey Clement the number 1 back?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good
I would
question.
think so.
That's a good question.
I think you're going to have to run the ball, and I don't know if Boston Scott's getting, 15 or 18 carries.
He was the guy. I remember that game on Monday Night Football. It was a Monday night last year. He was a big fixture in that game.
Yeah.
Against those 2 teams.
I think the offense has to have some kind of feel of continuity. Their O-line has to be able to play better. I think they need to score within the context of the game, not feel like, hey, we're all of a sudden late in the third quarter and we're in a 7-3 game.
Right. No, it's going to be a big matchup, and I'm excited to talk about it with you next week. We'll be back Monday. I know the game is playing Thursday. We'll be back Monday night to break it all down. Greg, thanks so much for joining us once again here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade.
All right, Fran, thanks.
Before we keep going with this episode, it is really important to me that I talk about voting. Now, depending on when you're listening to this episode, we are just 2 weeks away from Election Day, and that deadline to register to vote has very likely passed in your state. Last week here on the show, I talked about mail-in voting and why it's both perfectly safe and perfectly legal to fill out a mail-in ballot. So this week, I wanted to talk about the importance of voting. There's been a lot of discussion about how important the 2020 election is. Why is that? Not only is it a presidential election where we will figure out a new president, a new vice president, but voters will also choose 11 governors, 35 U.S. senators, 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, as well as hundreds of state and local officials. That's just from an individual candidate standpoint. But then you start thinking about what you're voting for. What are the issues that are important to you? When you're voting at the national level, you're making your opinion heard on issues like national security, global policy, international commerce, taxes, medicine and food safety standards, the postal service, the list goes on and on. Then you go down to the state level. That's where you're voting on issues like public education, auto insurance, highway maintenance, environmental protection at both on state land, and then even things like fishing and hunting licenses. Then you get down to the local level, and that's where things like school lunches, local judges, police, recreation programs for kids, housing and zoning, public transportation, public services. Not all of these issues are going to be important to every single one of you listening at home, but some of them are, right? And at every low level of government, there are things that either impact your day-to-day life, they may align with your views on society, or impact the bottom line for you at the end of the day or at the end of the tax season, right? So remember, 100 million eligible voters did not participate in the general election 4 years ago. Please do what you can to help lower that number. It is all of our civic duty to make sure that we get out and all of our voices are heard. Get out and vote on November 3rd. Well, great stuff this week from Greg, who you can follow on Twitter, just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at Eagles XOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And you know, I greatly appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That's one way to support the show. But the other way is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, give us a rating, or even leave us a comment. I wanted to give a shout out today to someone who left a rating and left a comment, and that's DNogs58, who left a 5-star review on Apple Podcast saying, appreciate this podcast so much. Question: Eagles have essentially been a 500 team since 2017. It seems that they cannot find an identity as to who they are. Why do you think that is? I watch other NFL teams who are consistently good. Why not the Birds in year 5 of the Carson Wentz era? So to me, and it's a good question, I think that it's multi-prongs, right? And I think the big thing, and it's just been a resounding theme with this team over the last couple of years, even in the Super Bowl year, was injuries, right? And I think whenever you have injuries, you are going to, especially the amount of injuries that the Eagles have had, and a lot of teams are dealing with that this year just because of the unique offseason. When you have a lot of injuries, you have to change your identity almost on a weekly basis, especially when you're having them to the volume that the Eagles have had them this year. If you just are going to plug away trying to do the same thing over and over and over again, despite drastic changes in personnel, well, it's very likely not going to work. So I think when you're looking at the injuries that the Eagles have had, just look at this year. When you change all those pieces along the offensive line, when you've got receivers going in and out, you lose a key piece like a Dallas Goedert, your running back is in and out of the lineup. I think that's going to affect how you operate both in the run game and in the pass game. Then you get to the next section of it, and that's when you have the change in offensive staffs. And I think when you have that change of the guard there, and remember, this is kind of the second or third different iteration of the offensive staff, since the Super Bowl. That's going to kind of change things, right? And when you bring in different people and when other people leave, that's going to change week-to-week game planning. It's going to change, obviously, the play sheet for Doug Peterson when he's calling plays, right? Because he's only going to be calling plays with the menu that's kind of given to him from his position coaches, whoever's in charge of third down and red zone, first and second down, run game, pass game, all those different situations. So I think when you look at the injuries and the change in coaching staffs, that's certainly going to lead to differences on what the team looks like on a pretty consistent basis. And then the other big thing too, and this shouldn't be discounted because I think when you look around the NFL, this is how it goes with quarterbacks, is as Carson Wentz gets older and more established and a bigger part of not just the locker room, but also in developing the game plan. This is the case with every single franchise quarterback. Those guys are going to have more input, and that's the way it should be, is that you want to run plays that your quarterback feels comfortable with. So as Carson Wentz becomes more and more acclimated to the league, he's going to have things that he likes, and he's going to want them put into the game plan as well. So when you're talking about all these different moving factors, injuries being a big part of it, and I would say probably the primary thing, that's why I kind of brought that up first. I think that's why you haven't seen necessarily a level of consistency in terms of how this team offensively tries to attack opposing defenses. And I think you look at the same thing on the defensive side. When you have changes in scheme and changes in personnel, that's going to change ultimately how you're going to try and attack opposing offenses. Obviously, there's been a little bit more continuity on the defensive side, both personnel-wise and coaching-wise. So I think that's why you've kind of seen less change there from a schematic standpoint. But to your question, I think that's why. I think those are really the big things as to why we've kind of seen the question that you're bringing up. So special thanks to Greg Cosell this week. Great question from you, D-Nogs. Special thanks to all of you guys out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcast offerings here at Eagles Entertainment. All that being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, for everybody here at the NovaCare Complex. I am Fran Duffy. We'll talk to you later this week.